Jeremy, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back. I was surprised you called.
Well, it hasn't been 10 years. It's been 8, what do we say, 8 years?
Yeah, 8. It was 2016.
2016. And also for the audience, we're in a bit of a different venue here. The listening audience can't tell, but those watching on YouTube can tell. We're actually at 25th Street recording in Oakland in this room that will seemingly be a podcast room when is all said and done. John Schimpf, the manager, and I are working on a plan, so we'll see how that goes. But Jeremy and I are giving it a test run just in its rawest form.
Should I start clapping my hands or something?
No, don't clap your hands. Too much of a cliche.
Sound guys.
So 2016 was the last time you were on. That was episode, what, 80?
Would we say 85?
Something like that? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So let's talk about today. So currently, you still have a studio in Oakland where you own the building, correct?
Yep.
But you had to change the name.
Pretty recently, just a couple months ago.
It was originally Megasonic?
Yeah, it was Megasonic for the last 15 years or something like that.
Okay.
And then I was doing a promotion with a mic company with the Vanguard folks.
Okay.
They were trying to tag me in some of their social media stuff. And every time people would come to either the Facebook page or the Instagram page for Megasonic, it would get blocked as potentially child pornography. And I was like, what? So I figured, I was being spoofed by someone or, someone messing with me. I don't know, they didn't like their mix. And Revenge. And then I did a little deep dive and I came across a few stories of people being completely locked out of their accounts for ridiculous reasons. And it turns out my particular case is because of the file share network, Megashare or whatever it's called, Megafile, something like that.
Okay.
Which I guess is popular with the perverts. Oh. And I because of the word mega in there, it got flagged as problematic. And instead of trying to go through, I read some horror stories of people trying to get their info out of digital prison. I decided just to rebrand and avoid the whole association.
Yeah.
I had only known the sales manager of Vanguard at the time, and the owner asked him how well he knew me after bumping into those problems. I was like, oh, if that's the first response, and that people believe what they read oftentimes, as we see, I don't want anything to do with that. So I just use my last name now. It's Goody Sound. And it was really quick. Nobody had goodysound.com. That was pretty quick. And
that's
it was
a shocking.
Real smooth transition. Yeah, it was kind of shocking. Just, seems like it'd be a natural permutation off of Good Sound or something like that. But
can I be frank with you?
Mm-hmm.
I like that better.
Now that I'm in my 50s, I do too. Yeah. I think I ran from my own name for a while because it's kind of, everybody has things about themselves. Like, funny last name, want nothing to do with that. But now it's like, funny last name, want to embrace it.
Personally, I don't find it funny. I like it. I think it's very appropriate for a studio name. So I dig it.
Great. Yeah.
I think that was, maybe it was meant to be. I don't know.
I kind of think it was a beneficial change because right after I changed it, some pretty good work started coming my way. And I don't think it has anything to do with that, but maybe it does.
So you changed the name. That's a bit of a challenge to a studio, but you weathered that brief storm and survived it. And actually, I think you came out better on the other end.
Yeah, I think it was a benefit.
Any other challenges that have been going on with the studio that have happened in the time that...
Well, I know that's sort of a leading question because there's been a big challenge of mine. Yeah.
I'm somewhat, I know, it's a rhetorical question.
Sure. Well, okay. So
sure.
About a year or so after we did the last podcast, so the building next to mine is like, there's dentists in there and stuff. It's like a 3-story office building. And on the top of that, there's some cell sites, 3 of them. There's Verizon, there's T-Mobile, and there's some other, probably AT&T. I can't remember. Anyway, long story short, they started upgrading their hardware to do the 5G stuff. And at that time, they had started using lower and lower broadcast bands in the frequency range down to the 7 gigahertz band, I think is the lowest they have now. And that stuff started getting on my equipment. like a really loud digital hash on everything. Everything. The whole building was, I mean, it was kind of unusable. And I kind of went through a period of depression. I was like, doing this my whole life in this building that we own, and can't work.
Yeah. Could you explain the digital hash? Like, what were you hearing?
Not so much the pulsing of a cell phone like you used to hear before they changed the hardware on phones, and more of a high frequency, constant kind of whine. I'd make sound effects, but nobody really wants to hear me impersonate digital noise.
In the range of, does it sound more like SMPTE time code or dial-up internet?
More like SMPTE time code.
Okay.
Yeah. And it could be intermittent, and it can have sort of sharp white noise spikes that come and go depending on the time of the day.
Okay.
Heavier traffic to the cell sites would cause more interference with my place. And I spent a year trying. At first, I thought, okay, it's got to be my infrastructure, some grounding issue, whatever. Ripped out all the patch bays, all the wiring, redid everything. Spent a bunch of money and time.
Oh my gosh.
Blurry eyed, just soldering, redoing everything. And then one day I had a like one of those flash recorders, a little portable Tascam recorder, and it was getting noise on it in my building, in front of my building. And I decided just to keep recording while I went down to the post office. I turn the corner and the noise goes away. I walk all through town and back from the post office, and as I come back around the corner of the building next door to mine, the noise starts. It gets louder and louder till when you're at my place, it's really loud. I was like, well, this has clearly nothing to do with the infrastructure. It's coming from something on that building. Started trying to figure out who I could talk to about it, and I wasn't finding anybody. You can't really just call up Verizon and say, hey, your guy's equipment's putting noise on my recording gear. No one's going to listen to you. I found a name. This could prove useful to other people. I was looking through permits on the City of Oakland website. I found a permit for that cell site, an application to install cellular equipment or something like that. And there was a name of the person that was the cell site manager who had applied for the permit, and their phone number. They had to have all that contact info on the application. I called the person. They said, well, that's not great. And they sent out an engineer with the largest, craziest looking EFI, RFI, EMI. I get all my letters twisted around because I've said them so many times, but crazy sensors, really interesting, cool guy. And their goal was basically to say it's below a specific region of health and safety, and our equipment isn't a problem for you. And he was able to measure it. They had communication back to the home office where they could turn off specific frequencies of the cell broadcast. When they turned down the tower, the noise went away completely. I had like a half dozen mics up and recording the whole time while they were running the tests. And you could see like all the small diaphragm mics that were particularly a problem. They all went quiet and acted like microphones should. Tube mics, they all started acting normally. And they turned on their gear and the noise came back, and they kind of came to an agreement with me that they'd turn down their broadcast to 50% power, and that seemed to be enough to get out of the audible range of inundating on my gear so I could keep working.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked pretty well for about a year. Every once in a while, one of the engineers at Verizon would come in and wonder why the tower was running at 50%, and they'd jam it up to 100%, and the noise would go crazy at my place again. I'd call the engineer, and he'd have them turn it back down. But, so I was having this anxiety of coming into work every day and not knowing if I'm going to be able to work that day or not because of interference.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was rough. I was kind of like pacing the Golden Gate Bridge for a while there.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
And anyway, cut to the chase. They're still broadcasting, and I found these connectors. Neutrik makes these very specific connectors. It's called, I think they're EMF line or RFI line, or once again, some 3 letters, all relating to, interference. And they have a really unique design where the ground isn't actually connected. You should look at the diagram on the Neutrik website. It's a lot easier to explain if you look at a picture of it.
I'll include a link for everybody.
Great. Yeah. Those have saved my life, and I can record with those. All the mics are pretty much fine. There's certain things that are still issues. I don't have any tube mics anymore. I sold off all my tube mics because those all seem to be pretty noisy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple engineers who don't come to my place anymore because they're amazing collection of, vintage tube mics they like to use on everything they can't use at my place. So
Right.
couple things have gone away, but in general, I can work. Guitars can be problematic. Certain guitars with bad grounding, or different types of pickups, or guitar pedals, just anything that doesn't have the best grounding integrated into the design of the product can be problematic. Tube amps, things like that, they can be noisy.
Well, didn't you build some Faraday cages?
I did. I've built 2 of them now, and I can share the video with you so you can post it up.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, and I'm sure
So
the audience would really, because there's got to be more people out there that are dealing with
I
this
know
shit.
of a couple now. Ever since my problem, other stuff. There's another local studio that's had the same problem. There's cell towers on top of their building, and they reached out. Hey, are you having these issues? You said something about that. So they're using the same connectors, and they seem to be doing okay.
Okay, so these Neutrik connectors are helping and little like miniature Faraday cages that you could put around, say, like a Fender Twin.
I mean, it's a few feet by a few feet cube.
Oh,
Yeah, it does. Like I was using like a Fender Princeton as my test amp, and so I built it to fit around that because that's
Can you talk about how that's constructed?
Yeah, it's really simple. Like I think I used 1 inch or 3/4 inch or half-inch, probably half-inch PVC piping, and they make little 3-way connectors for PVC, so you can build the corners. So you need 4 of those connectors
Okay.
and
So it's
6.
a PVC frame.
It's a PVC frame, and there's a company, I believe they have spots all over the country, called TWP. They sell mesh, all kinds of copper mesh and stainless steel mesh and blah blah blah, for whatever. People have all sorts of uses for that. I went with copper mesh and the finest weaving I could find, which it's like 300 strands per square inch or something like that.
Okay.
That you can surf around a site and find all the specs. So basically, it's PVC pipes with mesh around it and hot glued together. It's real crafty kind of stuff, but it works a treat. I have like a platform that's like one panel, put the guitar amp on that, and then there's a cube that goes over the top of that, and you can run some chords out the corner of it.
So you looked into, I think, large amounts of this material to potentially do it on the building at some point. Did
I've
you
been
not?
toying with it, and I thought for a minute I could get one of the cell companies to foot the bill, but they quickly changed their mind on that. But
Did you talk with an attorney about this at all?
not so much. Just like friends that are attorneys. I didn't retain anyone to ask them a bunch of questions because I mean, one person, one independent business person against a cell phone company doesn't seem very winnable. So I figured,
And I remember this because I talked to an attorney friend of mine on your behalf,
right.
and he said, "Yeah, probably ain't going to happen because of just government regulations around those bans allocated to those cell companies."
Well, and as luck would have it, T-Mobile changed their equipment a couple years later, and I started the problems all over again. But luckily, I had a lot of the solves in place by that time. So T-Mobile did the same thing. They sent over an engineer. He turned off their tower. Everything went quiet. He said, "Yeah, I can confirm it's us. Have a nice day." And that's as much as they wanted to do. Instead of looking for other people to save my hide, I just looked inward, and you got to look out for yourself. And this is the modern world, and if technology is progressing and we have to work in, these things are all over the place, and you just got to work with it. The tin hat part of me wonders what kind of radiation I'm absorbing every day there, but I can't think about that.
Could you, or have you tried, like putting this mesh on a door, for example, and could it be painted over and still be functional?
I think it could be painted over and still be functional, whether paint would stick to the copper and stuff and what it would look like. And I looked into building some panels outside and maybe disguising them so people don't just come steal all the copper off the side of your building. It's pricey. Copper's not cheap, and building and installing it's not cheap. So it's a real big gamble. I looked into you can get mesh imported from China. If I was going to do that, I might want to do that pretty soon.
You might want to do that before Trump comes into office.
Yeah, because that's going to change the pricing quite a lot.
Yes, especially, tariffs are just going to become a problem in that area.
Right. So In the meantime, I've been doing workarounds at the problem point instead of trying to treat the whole building. If I bump into a situation where I have time and money to run a science experiment, I might try to do the whole building, or at least do one room and maybe do that internally.
Wonder if that could be an insurance claim.
I hadn't thought about that. I wonder if asking them would even just trigger your rates to go up just by asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any remote possibility that there's a clause in your insurance policy
Like
that
a
would
loss
say,
of business or something like that?
yeah,
Yeah.
you could potentially do that. That way you're not trying to go at the cell companies themselves
Right.
and dealing with that monstrosity, the David and Goliath kind of mentality, but instead declare a loss of business. I mean, you've already lost like two regular engineers, right?
True. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a possibility. Or it could spur on a new product.
Well, I thought about that for a minute too, of making the guitar amp cage or Faraday cages. You could make some portable ones.
Mm-hmm.
There's more and more companies now that are selling that kind of stuff, and some of it's kind of crazy stuff, like hats, literal tinfoil hats that you can buy that are, RF blocking and stuff like that. And
Yeah, or DIs or racks that contained, mesh on the inside.
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking about all that stuff, but
Somebody's going to hear this and go, aha.
well, I'm a customer if they get around to it, because bringing a product to market is no easy task.
Let's go, everybody. Let's figure this out.
Right.
Okay, but you've got to a point with these Neutra connectors and the Faraday cages and a little bit of communication with the engineers who run these towers to try to mitigate the problem as best you can.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not always a big problem unless you're using vintage tube mics.
Right. Or problematic instruments or something that might come in the door.
But like every day, like, I don't know, KM184s, RE20s, 421s.
That's all working great.
Yeah.
As long as you use the right cable.
Got to use the right cable.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you noticed any weirdness other than that? Like in terms of how gear functions or responds?
Just things about say
like computers. Like, has your computer acted weird?
No, computer's cool. Knock on wood.
Wow.
Computer's fine. But like a FET compressor, like an 1176 style compressor, unless it's really overbuilt, those get pretty noisy pretty quick. FETs can induce noise pretty easily. So it's just a matter of gear choice.
That could be a gear mod from somebody.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Send in your 1176 and get a Faraday mesh inner frame built in there.
Cage the whole.
Or paste it against all the metal lid and such.
Right.
If you're taking these steps, that's great. But have you got any new clients that aren't necessarily bringing in guitar amps, like podcasts or audiobooks or post stuff?
Plenty of that. And, I mentioned it to you before at different, the Audio Nerds meetups or any of that. I've been kind of trying to move away from mostly music recording to do mostly voice recording. There's so many reasons for that, not the least of which is, at the end of a day of recording voice, I get in the car and drive home, I put on music, and it's real nice. It's real good. Or, oftentimes at the end of the day recording a band, you end up putting on a podcast or something like that. It's really funny how you go to search for the opposite thing you were just doing. So I tend to enjoy my music making time and working with musicians more if I'm doing a lot more voice recording than music recording. So if, a week full of right now I'm doing a lot of computer modeling training recording. And that's a bunch of hours. And when I bring musicians in right now, I'm doing nights and weekends for musicians. That's what I have available. But man, they're fun sessions. They're not tiring and they're not frustrating. And decision making seems to be pretty easy because you're sort of fresh to that frame of mind.
That's an interesting business model, like focusing mostly on voice-based recording during most of the time probably pays more than music sessions.
Generally, yeah.
And the clientele is not as demanding on the audio
It depends. to get whitelisted for this current project I'm on, to get the studio approved to do the job. Actually, they spec those nitric connectors in there, which I thought was kind of interesting. To see them in the document, I was like, oh, look at that. Other people are encountering something where they need these, so it's probably pretty pervasive. So sometimes the specs are real tight. But in general, as long as it's a nice, clean, on-axis recording without weirdness, you're in good shape. It's a different type of attention, too. You really, when you're working on dialogue and voice, you have to pay a certain kind of attention to make sure they get the words right. And, it's very intense kind of work, and you have to take breaks pretty often. You can't just, but oftentimes with music recording, it's less specific what exactly you're doing. There's a lot of time like, okay, well, we're not recording a vocal right now. We're listening back to stuff to come up with ideas of what to do next. And there's a lot more gray area in music recording than voice production oftentimes.
Tell me about, I think you, at one point you mentioned a Halloween themed thing that you were working on, like not toys, but Halloween decorations that
Yeah,
contain sound.
Like Halloween and Christmas. They've moved me into Christmas too. I've been at that for over 10 years now. I just started that when we first met.
Oh, wow.
And it was kind of like an interesting novel thing. And now it's become pretty key to my business. It's about a third of what I do every year. I think of it as a full-time job that's half the year or so, because there'll be a period where they're coming up with ideas. There might be 3 or 4 months where they don't have anything for me to do. And then all of a sudden I'll get a bunch of projects in my inbox of things they need. And they want to see them fairly quickly. So I have to be able to adapt my calendar to service that. So yeah, the Halloween stuff started out a little bit each year. And then as the company grew, it became more and more to where what was maybe 6 months worth of things to do has turned into at least something to do every month. An update or a revision. Some of the more successful products we do will get localized. They'll get translated into French and Spanish. So that usually comes kind of off season. While they're coming up with new products for the next season, they'll say, oh, can you take these 3 guys, some Reaper, Ghoul, Dracula, whatever type of product, and here's the Spanish translation, here's the French translation, make that happen. And I really I feel super lucky to land in this specific job, because I didn't know how well I would adapt to it and how suited it was to what I do already. You need to be able to kind of direct dialogue and characters and things like that, but you also need strong sound design, and you need some good music composition skills too, unless you're going to start farming stuff out, and that starts to get sluggish and expensive. And so it's nice to be able to kind of handle the whole production on your own. As it's gotten busier, I've brought on a couple different producers I know to pick up the slack, or if I book myself out a little too much, because I'm not one to turn things down.
The brilliance of that gig is, well, obviously you're doing it before Halloween and before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure that, that it's, how many months ahead is it?
A year.
Oh, a year?
I just finished like this Halloween. I was working on Halloween 2025. So
that's amazing.
And turning them in, like they need to get them into production by January or so to have them in stores by next November.
Okay, so but are
October.
you working in October of 2024 on projects for 2025?
Yes.
Okay, so then the brilliance of that is that this October, November, December, like those times are typically, or can be, depending. That's when stuff starts to,
yeah, it can be a sluggish time of the year for sure.
So that's a bonus.
It's really nice to have that kind of going. And especially like they, once they started handing me Christmas, and I sort of started being able to go back to the orchestration stuff I learned freshman year of college and things like that. That was real nice to kind of redevelop those skills and get much, much better at it now. As someone who's older and better perspective on things, I kind of can get into the arranging a lot better.
Amazing. So a lot of morphing is going on for you, and a lot of adapting to the situation whether it's the name change or the sonic intrusion from the cell tower and the decision to kind of say, okay, well, what doesn't, suffer from the cell tower thing as much? I mean, because bands tend to come in with
You never know.
amps and things that could greatly suffer from that
Absolutely.
if they're not appropriately maintained, which, I mean, that's to be, I guess I expect that to some degree with indie bands.
Sure.
What else are you doing? What else are you working on that helps keep that operation successful?
There's a company, they were a Bay Area company called Nuance. They've since moved under the Microsoft umbrella, but they closed their offices on the peninsula a couple years back, and they thought they could record all their dialogue needs for. They do like um AVR, automated voice response. It's telephone phone trees. You call up the hardware store, you call up Costco or Lowe's or whatever, and you press 1 for this, press 2 for that, and they thought they could do that in a WeWork space. And when I don't even know who thought that was a doable idea, but
Okay.
clearly no.
No.
So they were left scrambling to find a new studio to record, and I got lucky. It was a friend of a friend who was working there as one of the audio folks, and they said, "Oh, you should try Jeremy." And I just came from one of those this morning. They can be pretty intermittent. There's can be 2 hours of work every 2 months,
Mhm.
and then there can be a month where, like last year, we re-recorded all of the Social Security Administration, their entire phone tree in Spanish and English. So that was, a lot of work. Kind of mind-numbing because there's a lot of covering all the numbers from 1 to 1,000 and then from thousands up to 1,000,000. It's a lot of filling up a database with audio information, which I love. I've always liked things in bulk,
Mhm.
so being able to create 10,000 individual audio files that all work together to form this organism is pretty interesting to me.
Do you feel like you're compromising what you want, or in terms of doing all this voice stuff? I mean, I know that everybody has their desire of what they want to be doing on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Is this satisfying you enough?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think at times, like more than the music stuff, it's great to work on music and things, but it is, like I said, it's really like, it's very black and white when you're going to work and when you're not at work, when you're doing voice stuff.
Yeah.
They want a start time, they want an end time, and there's a task to do and that part is really satisfying because you're not kind of floating through the day wondering what may or may not get done on the record. And we got 5 songs to get to today, and hopefully we'll get 3 of them done. And you're not quite sure if you did a good job or not. You have to. I notice at the end of it, you have to talk to each other and remind yourselves that, hey, we got a lot done on the record today. If you think about it, like, okay, we spent 6 hours time correcting some drums, but necessary work apparently, and that kind of thing.
Let me ask you a bit about your networking things that you do. Like, you kind of stumble upon some of these gigs, and would you attribute that to networking outside of the typical, venues?
Luck, dumb luck,
Really?
and sticking around. My whole business plan was stick around, and something will happen.
Yeah.
And it keeps. I mean, not an ideal business plan. There's no real concrete thing to grab onto there, but I've managed to keep the doors open and not screw things up for people. And I mean, the last 3 things I mentioned to you that have been keeping me going have been friends of friends. Yeah, it's all been word of mouth. Albums I've worked on a bit. I mean, I do get musicians coming through because they know other musicians I've worked for, but again, it's all just local referrals. A little bit of I'd go on LinkedIn occasionally, but only if, like, let's say I worked with a company, like over the pandemic, there was a lot of remote recording. That really kind of fueled some of this too. I started thinking more and more about this is great. Come in and patch somewhere, one mic to a place. They get what they need. I get what I need. Nice to meet you. Have a nice day. I'll make sure to connect with those people on LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
just so, hey, we work together. We should probably know each other. but I don't do a lot of like seeking out second connections and trying to really like pound the pavement. Hopefully, I won't have to.
I find that my strategy on LinkedIn in general and social media in general is just to make people aware, conscious of, oh, he does this,
Mm-hmm.
and posting contextually, obviously what I post on TikTok is different than what I post on LinkedIn in terms of, you know, the words used. I mean, it's not like I'm not being myself, but you just kind of you tailor it for that format. And I guess that's been my strategy, is just, put it out there like, this is happening. Maybe this could be you.
Yeah, well, there's that. Yeah, absolutely. I think as my approach to LinkedIn as far as posting stuff, I I spend time on YouTube. There's a lot of with the Halloween and the Christmas animatronics and decorations. There's a lot of review videos out there, and there's some pretty good ones. There's some really funny ones. There's a lot of like Halloween influencers, for example. And spirit stores have huge events each year that invite these folks to come and preview all the items and vlog about it and that kind of thing. So those when there's a good demo of something I made that I'm proud of, I'll make sure to put those on LinkedIn. That's pretty much, if you were to look at that page, it's only just product demos of different animatronics.
That's remarkable that, I mean, I shouldn't be surprised that there are Halloween influencers. I
Oh,
mean, there's
absolutely.
people who review everything from coffee cups to audio gear to tires and Halloween stuff. So I shouldn't be shocked by it, but I'm just kind of like, oh my gosh. Wow.
There's tons of conventions and stuff all year round.
Where do you see expanding in terms of like trying to seize on these opportunities? Because I mean, you and I both know that there could come a day where that company gets bought,
Absolutely.
and that work could be sent somewhere else.
So
So how do you insulate and protect yourself from that?
trying to keep moving with anybody you're gonna meet. If they want to do something, do it, because you don't know what it's gonna lead to. I don't have a concrete plan, but I know I'm trying to focus still on the voice stuff and hopefully on the technology side of voice, because the large batch of files is it's both interesting and it's a chunk of work, but I guess more like project management, as opposed to most of my tasks for a lot of this stuff have really been as the facility, as a place for someone to go and do the recording. And they'll often be like a voice director or a producer dictating how the session goes, and I'm the technician just running the mic and the computer. It seems to be kind of a fun job, some of the voice directing and stuff, so I could see doing more of that. I definitely need to bring some other folks into the fold if I want to expand at all. Because right now I'm kind of at capacity, and basically learning to like not micromanage and have some trust in other people's skills to do the job and not make us look bad.
Yeah.
So probably a bit of personnel expansion. I've been collaborating a lot with my friend down in LA who's similar type of work, and we're trying to see if we can't combine our experience to present I guess you'd call it like a storefront
Mhm.
to people looking for this kind of stuff. He's done a lot of podcast production, that kind of thing. I'm producing a podcast right now as well, just like everyone else. But
Yeah, let's talk about that, because you came over and borrowed some of my mics that or a mic
yeah,
that I type of mics that I take out to trade shows, because they're just small and easy to manage, unlike an RA20. So what was that all about, and how does this blend into the bigger picture of your podcast production plans?
so that was I went to a BMX race down in Southern California, Inland Empire there, and interviewed a bunch of like world champion BMX racers, both from decades past and more recently. My wife's father, my father-in-law, is a man named Gary Turner, who started a bicycle company back in the late 70s called GT Bikes. They became kind of the product leader for BMX. He's considered the godfather of BMX biking. I didn't grow up doing any of that stuff. I grew up skateboarding, so we get along great because he's like, you don't care about me. And I was looking for a podcast to see if the old man had shown up on someone's podcast, and I wanted to listen to him talking. And there wasn't any with him on there. And I asked Gary, I said, have you done any podcasts at all? Because you got these stories. And he hadn't. Yeah, just about a year ago, I went and interviewed Gary for a bit about the building of the company and what it was like back then. And then I went and interviewed a bunch of BMX riders that were on his team. And I've come up with an outline for, I guess it'd be a limited series
Mm-hmm.
narrative podcast. I'm learning the lingo a bit too. That's the production side where you need to know what it is you're making. Like, what kind of podcast is it going to be and what are the parameters? And is it an ongoing thing like Working Class Audio where there's a different guest every week and it's an interview thing? Or is it a limited series? There was a really good one about Tiny Telephone and John Vanderslice that kind of inspired me to approach this at all.
And for just audience who is unaware, John's been on the show. I'll put a link in the show notes. You can check out that interview, but tell me more about this whole thing.
That one, the Tiny Telephone one was captivating. I actually, it was one of those times where I'd sit in the car and just listen. Like I got home, I was like, I'm not done with the episode. I'll stay in the car and finish, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interviews that were chopped up and intertwined with musical segues and just the pacing of it and the controlled kind of the rate at which the info and the story came out and the different kinds of overlapping perspectives was really engaging. So I started kind of thinking of that as a model of it's basically like the birth of BMX and the beginning of GT bicycles. And, you know, I've done some fun stuff. I've been kind of assembling all of the parts. I haven't really put together a sizzle reel or anything like that, but I did record a BMX bike a few weeks back and played the spokes and the tires and the frame and kind of made some beats out of it for the soundtrack. That should be pretty good. Just working through. It's tough to have a sort of secondary project that, you know, I'm also, of course, like any most folks, I'm playing in a band with friends. So it's like, okay, working in the studio, playing in the band, trying to put together this 8-episode podcast. It gets to be a bit much. So sometimes I'll disappear and binge watch for a few days.
I mean, you know, we have these talents for, you know, music and recording and well, let's just take music out of it for a minute and keep it as a sidebar. But essentially we have these talents with our recording capabilities. And there's so much stuff out there that needs our talents to do it, whether it's re-record, you know, or recording Social Security phone prompts or bands or whatever, audio cleanup, podcast. Do you spend any time thinking like, where else could I like branch off with what I know and how I know, you know, what can I do with the studio to make a living?
Well, I mean, my mind does drift towards like advertising quite a lot, but then I think, do you really want to work in the ad world? And it's also really hard to break into. The times that I've worked on ads for folks have been some of the few corporate times where it's been an all-nighter. Like we have to have this done tomorrow and the ad producer's losing their mind and we're doing it. We're not going anywhere until it's done kind of thing, which has a certain level of excitement, but it also feels a bit abusive. And I don't know if that's specifically the best way forward, but certainly a way forward is getting more involved with ad agencies and production of you know, because the soundscapes and short, like the Halloween gig and all that, all of those are real, you know, 18 to 30 seconds long. So you have to learn to make the point pretty quickly and have events very well choreographed and orchestrated across a short amount of time, which that sort of approach is advertising, right? In a 30-second or 60-second commercial, every second is going to be accounted for. And that seems enjoyable to me. But like I said, the schedule and the expectations could cancel out the type of work that it is.
Well, would you see, I mean, the BMX thing is one series. Could you see getting more into podcast production?
Absolutely. I should have continued on that. I suppose that the BMX thing started out as a labor of love. There are some business opportunities related to that right now, but it's more, I was looking at it as, well, I said I was going to do it. I interviewed the father-in-law, so now I absolutely have to do it. But since I'm going to do it, it would make a great calling card for other production for other people's podcasts. There's a company here in Oakland. We were driving down the 5 last year, and the wife picked a podcast to listen to, and it was confusing because they started mentioning a product during the podcast, and they were using it in the story. It was for like Gym Pass was the product they were selling, and it was a mystery. And in the course of the story, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm really glad I had my Gym Pass so I could go and work out and work through this problem." And I was like, "What is going on?" And I looked up the production company. They're here in Oakland, and they're specifically custom podcast for specific audiences. Like this was for HR people to listen to, and it was an engaging story about a murder, but it was it was called Murder in HR,
Mm-hmm.
and it sold HR products as part of that. And I thought it's so ridiculous that I got to be a part of this, and I haven't called them yet because I've been doing my own thing. But yeah, there's so many podcasts are really young still to me. I think there's a lot of ways they're going to grow and expand.
Yeah.
You only switched to video recently, right?
Yeah, I neglected video for 10 years because I think for me, because I tend to edit the shows and try to make them super concise so people get the info and they don't get a lot of meandering or ums and you knows. I mean, I leave a few of them in, but I didn't know how that would work in the world of video. Well, then I figured it out. I was like, oh, okay, you just do a cross dissolve on the picture and that's fine. You know, people, the editing that people do on YouTube these days, I think there's a lot more that's acceptable than what used to be acceptable. So yeah, I figured it out and I'm going down that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're recording with video today.
Right.
And I've had to educate myself a little bit on all of these things.
Yeah, I've picked up 2 or 3 video jobs in the last couple years, and thankfully they've been really simple. Like having to learn to put titles on and stuff like that was the most complex thing I've done. I mean, editing video is kind of easier because you can see it.
You can, and there's something in Adobe Premiere Pro that I really like that I wish the DAWs, and maybe some DAWs do this and I'm not aware of it, but there's this magnetic cursor thing that, like, you know, if you make a cut on one thing, the magnetic nature of the cursor can, you know, let's say you make the cut and then you want to make the cut on 2 or 3 other tracks, video or audio, it'll just snap to that cut point that you just made.
Oh, nice.
So there's
Yeah.
no guessing.
The other thing I noticed in Adobe is if you have, say, multiple cameras and fancy audio that you already mixed and you want to add to the video, you can make these multicam shots and it'll auto sync everything for you. And just syncing up the files was a big, barrier to entry to me before.
Yeah, synchronization is a breeze. And then I actually use this thing called Autopod for the YouTube channel where you like, in this case, what we're recording, it'll take the 2 shot, the Jeremy shot, the Matt shot, and then the shot of both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it will, you say, this is Jeremy, this is Matt, this is the 2 of them. Here's the audio that corresponds to them. And how often you want the double shot to appear. I'm giving away all the secrets right now.
No, people need this.
And then you just say, create multicam edit. And
nice.
It will go through. And then I swear it's got to be like 3 minutes or less. It will take a hour-long episode, chop it up, and then like most of the work is done.
Oh, that's excellent.
And then you just kind of go in and make some tweaks in your own edits for, things that you want to tweak.
Mm-hmm.
But it's amazing.
Yeah. So more video means more audio. I'm thinking there's still a lot of opportunity in things that haven't even been invented yet. So I'm just kind of, even the IVR stuff I'm doing, the phone tree stuff is already, that's pretty old technology. And most of the stuff we're working on is products that just need maintenance, right? Because the newer systems they're developing for companies are a blend of pre-recorded things plus AI voice and like that. So I think there's going to be a lot of dialogue stuff in the future that's...
I want to, if we're talking about some of this Adobe stuff and some of these tech things, I also want to just tip everybody off to this thing that you got to check out. Adobe makes an AI voice repair product that has saved my ass numerous times.
I've used it.
I don't want to really tell you which episodes, but there's like, okay, so I had an episode recently where the recording on the Pro Tools end of the person I'm interviewing died partway through. And so we were dependent on the mic on the laptop of the Zoom call.
Mm.
Well, I ran it through this Adobe thing. You upload it, it listens to it, and then you choose how much correction, and it's shocking how good it sounds.
Yeah.
It could take a recording of somebody on a laptop mic, take all the noise out, make it sound like they got up on an SM7 or an RE20 like this, and, really make it sound amazing. And so that's out there. So if you run into anything with noise issues, it's cool.
I think I've gotten a lot of use out of a plugin called D-Room Pro, or just D-Room.
I've heard of this.
Really good for adjusting the ambience of things, and you can take samples of the room tone, and it'll adjust its curve.
I'm not really impressed with Isotope's D-Reverb. It's in light doses it can work, but if you get too heavy-handed with it, it just sounds funky.
Sure, yeah. I think what's the company that makes Accentize is the company that makes that plugin, the D-Verb or D-Room.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll have to include a link for people, and I'll include a link to the Adobe thing that I'm talking about, which is super cool and like total black magic in my eyes. As we record this, it's raining here in Oakland, and there's a pipe behind me that the water is just racing through. And hopefully by the time this comes out, people will not be able to hear that at all, based on the crazy amount of technology that we have to clean up voice in this day and age.
Yeah, you got to put a mic over on the pipe there to get a
sample of it.
Get a sample of it.
Well, wait, hold on a sec. Okay, that
Perfect.
should do it.
Yeah, I should do.
Well, and even on the sound devices recorder that we're recording to, I've got the noise reduction. I can only have it on one channel, unfortunately. Or actually, I think I can have it on two channels. I just have to pay another $300 for the plugin, which, yeah, that's a little pricey sound devices. But that really works to get rid of sometimes just general electronic noise, and works in a great way.
I just this week changed all the light bulbs out at the studio because I noticed that the LEDs that were in there previously are starting to age, and I think there's probably a little transformer in each one, but they're starting to squeal a little bit, and you could see it on the. I do a noise floor print each week for the one tech company I'm working for, and you could see a little ripple in the signal in the noise in the room tone, and it was lights off, lights on. You could see the change. So I just got all new bulbs in there, and it's gone.
Yeah, it's funny, like little things like that for studios. It's just stuff you don't really think about. It's like, oh, let's just go to the store and pick up some light bulbs, and then you put them in, and then they emit some kind of whine sound. And
here in California, you can only get LEDs now. They don't sell new halogens or incandescents.
You can buy Edison bulb incandescents still.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. I went to a couple stores last week looking for bulbs.
There's a store on 4th Street in Berkeley, I think, that sells incandescent Edison bulbs if you want to like get away from the LEDs. And I know I'm totally way off topic here from Working Class Audio, but
it's the little things.
When they did that and they went and they made that mandate, it would seem to me that there's way more electronics that are going to be bad for the landfill with LED bulbs. And I know that they're supposed to last 10 years, but all the LED bulbs we buy, they last like maybe 2 years at best.
Yeah, and they'll have a little circuit board in there and stuff. It's all a bunch of parts that are just going to go to the landfill.
Yeah. I think there's maybe less inside a light bulb. Am I like way off topic or what?
It's all related.
It's all relative.
It's all electricity. Yeah.
It's all relative. Well, let me ask you this, to stay on the positive. What is working for you? What do you find that's really working well for you? And do you think that you could seize on that, on those things more?
As far as type of work I'm getting, or
whether it's type of work or running the studio or just audio business in general.
I gotta say that the pivot towards the dialogue stuff is really, it's helped a lot because I kind of had this loose goal that I wasn't pushing really hard on. It took 10 years to kind of change the percentage of what I'm working on. And it's the, if you're set up and you can leave things set up and have that consistency there, it's just a lot easier on the personal schedule. And if there's more of that, it's just, it's great. Like all you can eat if they want to send more my way. And you know, you meet different folks in different companies with different needs. Last year I spoke with some folks at a meditation company in the city that have an app, real popular app, and they have this, I guess their whole hook is that there's different instructors from all over the world, and some of them will record in the back of their truck with an iPhone, you know, and all the audio quality is all over the map. So they needed someone to come in and uh, normalize, if you will, not actually normalize, but make
Standardize.
make more consistent their whole library of instructors. And those kind of projects are a great mental challenge,
Uh-huh.
and they can pay off financially really well, and they can be done and done. You can go and do the job, and you don't have to bring that home with you and think about, oh, what if I change the chord and the turnaround or something like that? You know, you don't have to think
Right.
about the hi hat
Am I going to
pattern.
leave the hi-hat mic in or am I going to take it out?
That's the worst. I mean, nobody seems to want a hi hat mic, but I can't get enough of it.
Right. You know, but this is really interesting because there may be some studios out there, whether small home studios or separate facilities or buildings, whatever, that might be struggling
Mm-hmm.
to support themselves on music alone. And that kind of a pivot could work in a lot of different areas. Probably it's a much more mainstream recording activity because the voice is, something that we all depend on and hear, and it's used in everything.
And there's a lot of podcasts out there, and they're all at different, just like record labels or something like that. There's people who podcast out of their basement and they can't imagine spending money to go into the studio. But then there's people who might get some venture funding to do a podcast, and they have to go to a studio and they're obligated to spend that money. And if you can service that, and might even be something you're interested in hearing about, like sometimes you forget you're at work because people are having these great podcast conversations and you get
Mhm.
engrossed. So I enjoy it quite a lot. I mean, I was already listening to a lot of podcasts, like probably, 6 different shows each week, and some of them have a couple episodes a week if you think about like Marin or something like that.
Mhm.
So it's not that much of a leap to get involved with recording them and producing them. And
Yeah.
I do see like having maybe taking myself out of the chair and not being in the speakers as much so I can have a higher level overview of projects. And if you can become a producer, it's a little more nerve-wracking coming up with your own projects to work on, and hopefully they fly and pay off for you. However, you like learning to market a podcast is something I have no knowledge of, and I'll be bothering you about later. So, you know what I mean?
I mean, quite honestly, I'll just tell you. I mean, for me, it's social media. I don't buy ads. I post. That's about it. And I think at the moment as we record this, which is Friday, the 22nd of November, right now there's a mass amount of people leaving X, Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
and I won't go into the politics of it, but they're leaving and they're going to Blue Sky. So Blue Sky right now, I think algorithmically speaking, I think this is the right time to be there posting, your studio sessions, your podcast things you're trying to promote, because it's just not being as aggressive in its algorithm like Facebook is or Instagram can be, where you kind of get like locked into
Mm-hmm.
a social media digital like box
Mm-hmm.
where you only see like the echo chamber of your own stuff. Your stuff can get seen, I think,
I see.
if
Yeah.
you go to Blue Sky and check that out.
Yeah. I've just started hearing about that this last week. It was like a mass exodus.
Oh, I know. I had a conversation this morning with a group of people about it, and it's coming out more and more. And also just on the topic of studios that are trying to expand into voice, if you're trying to like deal in video at all, I mean, you know, as we record this audience, Jeremy and I have my iPhone between us with this app called Double Take. I'll put a link in the show notes. I'm not a video person, but I kind of got up to speed on Premiere Pro for YouTube, and we're using this Double Take thing with the iPhone, and I have another camera off in the distance to record both of us. But I think that you can inch your way into it a bit
Sure.
and get cozy with it and still, like, you know, lean on all your hardcore audio skills.
There's something to be said about having a host or two hosts and a guest or three guests or some, you know, there's one podcast, I think the last time we had 6 people in there, which is, you know, managing that. There's a bit in the post where, you know, like microphone bleed and making the right choices, consistent choices. You don't want one person on a SM7 and another person on a AT4033 because you're going to have like one condenser person and one dynamic person, and they're not going to sound like they're in the same place at all. And so, you know, there's enough of a technical challenge there, even if it's just a couple people talking, that, you know, you can sink your teeth into that. And if it keeps coming back, consistent work is great. I mean,
yeah, and there's things like the Dugan mixer, which you can get in software form these days, where it really in a group of 6 to 8 people can prioritize, you know, mic gain.
Right, that auto mix.
I don't know if that's really meant for live or I think it's more meant for live, but I think it could apply to studio.
I think you could probably use it in a studio situation. It's you know, between gates or expansion and visually looking at waveforms and stuff, as long as you don't miss anyone's asides, it's kind of easy to mute mics pretty quickly.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
In post anyway, you know.
So is it primarily just you working out of your studio these days?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, but you're looking to change that, I assume.
Yeah, if the workload continues at the pace it is, I don't think I can survive too much longer. I mean, meaning I'm gonna get sick or something like that, and I'll have to cancel stuff. And so having other folks around or changing the type of work I'm doing each day, when I hand off the Halloween stuff to my production partner, it's a totally different experience for me. It's not so much I'm there making the thing, I'm reviewing the thing he made and reacting to it and giving him advice or praise depending on what I'm hearing. Like, and that's a really enjoyable task as well. If you can collaborate with someone else where maybe they get something to the alpha, beta version 1, whatever you want to call it, an initial idea of a production, and you go, this is cool, but it's getting a bit long-winded here or there, or I was expecting more of this or that. And then you can go do other stuff, and sometime later they present you with an updated thing, and you can now react to the updated thing, say, great, you addressed it. That's a fundamentally different job than being in charge of microphone levels and hitting record. And that breaks up the day in a nice way too, if you can get some of that kind of stuff going.
So what's the website for the studio now?
Goody Sound.
goodysound.com. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Link will be in the show notes, and any other links that we discussed or that you want to send my way, I'll make sure it's there. Really good to see you.
Yeah.
Fascinating to talk about a lot of this stuff and the changes in your audio life and how you've adapted. I really got to give you some praise for that. Really, like, just
appreciate it.
You know, you're throwing a few curveballs and you've really like managed to make it work out without like sitting around going, oh, poor me.
I mean, I did some of that too. It was pretty dark for a while, but you know, you don't get anywhere doing that. So
yeah, you figured it out. That's great. Wow. Well, good to see you, and thanks for returning. And yeah, I think we need to have another cup of coffee.
I'm jittering, but I'm ready.
Okay, let's go. All right.